to apologize for my bad handwriting. That being said, let's begin with the preface and foreword of the book. So, in the book's cover only, in the side of it, if you open the very first page of the book, you'll see a preface that tries to summarize what exactly this book is going to be about. So, Sai Deepak writes that India, that is Bharat, the first book of a comprehensive trilogy, that would be 3 books he would write on this particular issue, and this particular book would be focusing on the influence of coloniality into the present day structure of Bharat. That is to say, how coloniality has resulted in structural changes in our very society, in the construct of our society, in the various social structures, in the various units of society, in the architecture of society, and so on and so forth. The process that Sai Deepak has dealt with in this book has started from the age of discovery of 1492 to the Government of India Act of 1919, and how even the international development, such as the formation of the League of Nations and other charters like Treaty of Westphalia and so on and so forth, actually resulted in this particular instance of coloniality and how it impacted Bharat. Then he has talked about how universal constructs like secularism, most importantly, and other constructs like toleration, and all of these things have stemmed and originated from Christian political theology. So when we talk about secularism, it is not an ideology that is there with the Indic civilization. It's an ideology which is being forced as a result of the Christian political theology and the colonialism. Lastly, how Middle Eastern coloniality, which is to say the Islamic invasions of Bharat, and that has also led to some detriment in the Indic civilization, that has also been dealt with during the course of this book. And lastly, the need of decoloniality is emphasized. That is why there is a need to liberate Bharat from its shackles, and in the spheres of, let's say, religion, culture, history, education, and so forth, and to reclaim the rich heritage of Bharat. After that, the foreword of the book has been written by Dr. Gautam Sen, who is the co-creator of the graduate program in international political economy at the London School of Economics and Political Science. So this foreword is a kind of summary of the whole book according to me, and what all Dr. Gautam Sen deemed to be important in this book. Firstly, he starts by telling us about the accidental journey of Mr. Sai Deepak, who is an engineer turned lawyer, and his discovery with the Indic civilization and with the rich past, and how it was a completely accidental journey. Secondly, he talks about how this book ends at 1920 precisely, and the other 2 books that would come about will be dealing with the periods after 1920. So from the age of discovery, that is 1492 when it started, to about 1920 would be the focus of this book. Then how Sai Deepak is an autodidact in terms of the fact that he is completely self-taught when it comes to decoloniality. He has read extensively a lot of works, he has interviewed a lot of individuals, he has talked to a lot of individuals to gain insights on this issue. And the interest on this particular topic of Mr. Sai Deepak started from the Sabrimala Ayyappa temple case, because in this case there was a conflict between the traditional values of the Indic civilization and the modern notion of religion and secularism and so on and so forth. So all of these issues force Mr. Sai Deepak to examine these issues at detail, because otherwise the opinion of the units of India, let's say the judiciary or executive, could be from a colonial lens, and that colonial experience was something that Sai Deepak dealt with in the case herein. Also, this uh, Supreme Court did not receive this particular ideology of Sabrimala temple from the traditional lens. Rather, it focused more on the rationality of modernity, even though it comes from a colonial experience and a distorted consciousness of the Bharat society. Furthermore, this decoloniality is a necessity as compared to the intellectual assumption of modernity, which is to say, an idea that is derived from the Christianity and from the colonial past, as opposed to something which is of Indic nature and value. Furthermore, how Christianity destroyed the indigenous traditions of, let's say, Bharat and subjugated the natives of the particular place which was colonized. All of these aspects are also dealt with in detail. The primacy of the indigenous civilization and how it was slowly destroyed is something that is talked about in detail. And furthermore, the European worldview is then thought to be the right worldview, and it is forced as the right worldview. And how this European worldview has overpowered the Indic civilization and the Indian view or the Bharatiya view is something that has been talked about. And furthermore, this European worldview is something that the former colonies have not been able to get out of. The Islamic influence on the Bharatiya civilization and the negative impact that it has had, especially when it comes to the secular polity, that all also have been talked about here. And how the Marxist view is, which is another universalizing European product, and the fallacies that it has also been dealt with. And then the religious and the cultural nature of the East India Company was talked about, which is to say that the East India Company, which we all think came primarily for economic reasons and trade, are not entirely true, because from 1614 onwards there was a propagation of gospel which was affirmed as one of the primary motives of let's say any company in that regard. And from 1683 onwards, a charter was issued that talked about war on heathen nations, and it authorized this war for the East India Company. Thereafter, the colonial experience, how it still reaps deep inside us. And on one end, the British talked about toleration and respecting of the religion, and then they vilified all of our practices, or all of the practices of the Indian or the Bharatiya people and the Indic civilization, by terming them as superstitions and so on and so forth. And because of all of that, rather than propping a proper division of power like that after Treaty of Westphalia between the church and the affairs of the state, an hollow division was done, which is to say that temple control, even in the present day society, is something which to a large extent is managed by the state, because of this colonial experience, and how there was not a proper division but a biased division to actually destroy the Indic values, civilization and the religion. Thereafter, after the first war of independence also, even though the British government directly took over from the 1858 Charter Act, and it got into power after the Queen's proclamation and said that it would now be religious neutral, still there was a lot of focus on forceful forceful conversions, and why these forceful conversions are necessary to spread the tenets of Christianity. And this so-called respect of religion, was only hollow in nature, because mass conversions of individuals was happening, and church got a lot of support, and other such things kept on happening. That being said, the framework of our 1947 constitution is from the Government of India Act of 1919, and the architecture is from the 1935 Act of 1935 Government of India Act, 1935 Act, and these particular aspects have been dealt in detail in the subsequent books, especially the architecture, and how these relate to the formation of the constitution also have been dealt in the subsequent books. Thereafter, the notion of the so-called civilized nations, which the European countries took upon themselves to say that we are civilized nation through the Treaty of Westphalia or through the Paris Peace Conference of 1919, led to them focusing more on subjugation of the natives and their interests, and the propagation of the so-called secular order, which itself derives itself from the Christian order. Lastly, Dr. Gautam Sen talks about his hopes from the future, which is to say that even even Mr. J. Sai Deepak, who concludes this book by saying that he hopes that the public institutions like the executive and the judiciary would talk about these particular things, and the coloniality and its mindset would be removed, and we would reclaim our Indic civilization and our rich historical culture.